Last time we were together, we talked through Genesis chapter 6, and I said we're going to do this at least in two parts. We might even have to break this into another part to get through all of it, but I'm going to try my best to go ahead and get through all of this right now. In Genesis chapter 6, we're not going to go all the way back. So if I suggest that if it's unfamiliar or if you haven't seen our discussion on that, you go back and watch it. But in Genesis chapter 6, it's about the fall of what we said, the fall of the watchers. And in Genesis 6, it doesn't actually use that language, watchers. Instead, it calls them the B'nai Elohim, or the sons of God. The sons of God uh, come down and have sex with the daughters of men, and they have Nephilim, fallen ones. And these were the men, the mighty men, the men of renown in that day. Um, and the reason we're doing this in a couple of parts is because it's a commonly misunderstood chapter of the Bible, and it's a commonly misunderstood story. So if we're going to understand the Torah, which this is the whole point of these Torah talks, is to get a grasp on what Torah is. And the Hebrew word Torah means law or instruction. And as you examine the Torah, in the Bible, that is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. As we examine the Torah, what we begin to see is that most of the Torah is stories, and because most of it is stories, then the word law is probably a little bit too simple for us to understand, or too simple for us to categorize Torah. Instead, the word instruction fits a whole lot better. So, through these stories and through the laws that the Most High has given us, He's given us instruction, and specifically instruction of how to love, live, and follow Him. Right. So, in Most High's instruction, we get this strange chapter in Genesis 6 where these sons of God, these angels, fall and have sex with women. And what's really interesting about it is in Genesis 6, it's one paragraph. We get about five, maybe six sentences total about this colossal event. Now, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the book of Enoch, that is the first book of Enoch, and we're going to look at it as some supplemental information. So we're going to take it in five steps. One, why Enoch? Two, what happened? We're going to look at the contents of the book. Three, who are the key players? Four, what were the consequences? And then five, what are the implications for us? We're going to think out loud. If these things are true, let's think it out loud. So, first of all, why Enoch? Why are we going to use Enoch as we're talking through the Bible and as we are thinking through the instructions of the Most High, etc.? There's a few reasons. One, scholars would say that the book of Enoch, the latest, or I'm sorry, yeah, the latest date that most scholars would give to the book of Enoch is the second temple, what they would call Second Temple Judaism, right? Meaning, probably at least 100 years before Christ was on the scene is when this book was written, according to scholars. And there are many scholars that would say it's actually far more ancient even than that. But at the latest, what we're talking about is Second Temple Judaism, 150, 160 years before the time of Christ that this thing is being written, right? Um, I happen to think it's even far more ancient than that. And in the Ethiopian church, the oldest Bible that we have on earth is written in a language called Ge'ez. The Ethiopian Coptic church is what some would label that as. And they have Enoch as a part of the canon. Also, the Catholics have Enoch as a part of the canon of their scriptures, et cetera, et cetera. So there are people that hold this book in extremely high regard. So regardless of whether you think that it's part of the canon or not, it's definitely informing the New Testament. It's written far before the New Testament is penned, and it clearly has its imprints, its fingerprints on the New Testament. Jude quotes it directly. First Peter quotes Enoch directly, and in several places alludes to what's happening here in Enoch, specifically the Gospels and the Apostle Paul. So that covers most of the New Testament. So this book has a greatly, whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not, this book has greatly influenced what we call the New Testament. So shouldn't we know what's going on, regardless of how we feel about it? And that's up to you. I'm not going to try to influence you as to what you think, um, what weight that you should give this book, but we should all at least examine it and don't make decisions based on mere ignorance. Okay, so that's the big reason why. And uh, the story that we see here, at very least, the authors of the New Testament saw this as the worldview by which the New Testament is being birthed out of. So whether you call this the Word of God or not, understand that what we know to be the Word of God was influenced by these stories, and these stories were seen as real and valid. So just know that. And to not have that view is actually to be in the grand scheme of history, you're actually in the minority. So that's why Enoch. So what happened? Let's actually look at. We're going to go through some slides here in just a second, but let's actually the main point of all of these times is just to look at the texts themselves and let them speak for themselves. So let's actually look at Enoch. So what actually happened, starting in Enoch chapter 6, starting in verse 1, and it happened when the sons of men multiplied. It happened when the sons of men multiplied in those days, they beget good and beautiful daughters. And the angels, the sons of heaven, saw them and longed for them and said to one another, come, let us choose for ourselves women from among the people and bring forth for ourselves children. Okay, so let me just stop there just for a second. If you go back to Genesis 6 and you look at it, these words and these phrases match almost exactly. The sons of men multiplied on the earth in those days. The daughters of men were beautiful. And now what is said in Genesis 6 is that the sons of God come to the daughters of men. In Enoch, it actually gives us a little bit of different information. It says that these are the angels. In Hebrew, this would be the word malak, which, just to be clear, the first book of Enoch, we don't have in Hebrew, but it was very obviously originally written in either Hebrew or Aramaic. Anyway, so you should see a whole, even though the copies that we have are in Syriac and Greek, we should see a whole bunch of Hebrew isms in them. And in fact, we do. Okay. The angels, this is the word malak in Hebrew, the sons of heaven, or the sons of Shemaim, the sons of the sky, right? The sons of the other realm, the higher realm, saw them and longed for them and said to one another, come, let's go for it. Let us take these women, right? So again, the story matches perfectly. Verse 3, Shem Yaza, which there are different, this is the Septuagint translation. This is basically the Greek translation of the Hebrew into English. So it goes from Hebrew to Greek to English. We've got a few other translations that we'll look at as well for some supplemental information, but this is the Septuagint is the primary translation we're looking at. Shemuza was their ruler. Now that's important. We're going to come back to who is Shemyaza or Shemuza, and said to them, I fear you may not wish to do this deed, and I alone will be responsible for a great failure. This is the Greek word hamartia, which is just sin. So I'm going to be responsible. I alone am going to be responsible for a great sin. So now, right off the back, what Enoch is telling us is that the angels or the sons of God, there's a tiered system, and there's at least a ruler, and we're going to keep going forward. And this guy, at least of the rebels, he is the leader of the rebels. Therefore, they all answered him, let us swear an oath and devote one another to mutual destruction, not to turn back from this decision until we complete it and do this deed. Then they all made a vow together and put each other under a curse in regard to this thing. So now they're taking oaths and they're making vows and they're calling curses upon themselves to legally bind themselves to this thing. So this is what we already have is we've got these angels using a lot of law language. That's interesting. They're making these these oaths and contracts with one another and calling curses on themselves. Very interesting. Verse 7. These are the names of their rulers. Shemyaza. This was the ruler of all the angels. So again, so we got Shemyaza. Um, um, he's called their ruler twice, and then he names 18 or 19 other angels. Which we're not going to go into all of these, but one thing I want you to notice, and I highly encourage you. You can find this for free online. The Book of First Enoch. You can find it for free online. I highly encourage you to go and do your own supplemental reading. So hopefully this just pushes you to do your own research. But one thing I want you to notice is as this is naming all of these angels that are about to fall, there's an angel that's missing, namely Azazel. And we're going to get to who Azazel is in just a second. But this guy, Shemyaza, he is called the ruler of these angels. So just tuck that away in your mind for a second. The reason I have this highlighted is because this is actually a pretty poor transliteration. This one transliterates it much better. Kokabel. In Hebrew, the word kokab means star. In Hebrew, the word kokab means star. And obviously, El is God. So this is the star of God, or what. And we're gonna get to these names, what they mean, and why they matter. But just note that one of the chiefs under the chief rebel, there's a guy named Star, or Star God, or the Star of God, or whatever, something along those terms. Kokabel, star. So how are these beings related to stars? We'll come back to that in just a second. First, we're just answering, before we talk about who these characters are, we're going to answer what actually happened. So so this is corroborating everything that we saw in Genesis 6. Then they took for themselves women, each one of them choosing for themselves, and they begin to go to them and to defile them, and they taught them. So now we're getting some supplemental information. This is not in Genesis chapter 6, but remember, this is the prevailing thought in Judaism by the Second Temple. So as we come to the New Testament, this would have been exactly what they thought and they believed. So if you believe something different, you're believing something that is different than what the New Testament authors believed, and different than what okay, so if you have a differing opinion as to what's going on here, that's fine, but make sure that you have opinion based on, basically some kind of, make sure you have some footing to stand on. You're not just forming opinion based off what somebody else said, or based off a vacuum of ignorance, right? This is the prevailing understanding of what's going on in Genesis chapter 6, is what's happening here in the book of Enoch. All right, let's go forward. Verse 7, picking back up there. Then they took for themselves women, each one of them choosing a woman for themselves, and they began to go to them and defile them, and they taught them sorcery, enchantments, cutting of roots, and explain herbs to them. It's going to say that they teach them much more than this, and we'll get there. But let's just stop here for a second and see what Enoch is saying, that the fallen angels are responsible for having taught these people. Because remember, in Genesis chapter 6, what happens is that the wickedness of man gets accelerated to such an extent that the Most High says, "I've got to flood the earth," right? And what Enoch is giving us is supplemental information, and specifically information is that it's these fallen angels that started teaching them, the people, certain things that perpetuated wickedness to such an extent that the Most High's heart was grieved at the wickedness of man, and he did the flood. All right, so let's go back. I want to take a look at these words just really briefly. The word sorcery is pharmakias. You've probably heard that before, but it's where we get the word pharmaceuticals from. So what Enoch is saying is that the fallen angels are the ones who first taught men how to synthesize some sort of pharmaceuticals, which might seem strange to you, but you know, even in modern day, we go to a place called Rite Aid, right? RITE, Rite Aid, aiding in our right. We go to Rite Aid to get our pharmaceuticals. Somebody knows something to have named these things the way they've named them, right? Rite Aid. We never even think about it. but it's literally talking about aiding in a ritual to get your pharmaceuticals. Interesting. So that's the first word, sorcery. The next one is enchantments, and this word basically lends itself to the idea of melodic spells or songs. Basically, how to. So some of them taught them how to do pharmaceuticals, sorcery, mixing stuff. Some of them taught them how to do these melodic enchantments through songs. The cutting of roots. Think about like chakras and connecting your root chakra and making sure you know your energy and all these things. And then some of them explained herbs. So that's interesting. The herbs are already there, but they're teaching them how to manipulate the herbs in some kind of way. And this makes me think of DMT, which if you've ever heard a Joe Rogan podcast or anything like that, they talk about um, mushrooms or these psychedelic these things that are found in nature in specific toad frog or they have shamans mixing these herbs out in the desert, and they have these extremely strange and what they call highly spiritual trips. And often when somebody specifically with DMT, if a group of people are all tripping on DMT all together, they will have correlated and simultaneous psychedelic trips where they all see the same things, right? So they're anyway, if you aggregate all this information, these things that seem kind of sparse in our minds, we've heard of, we see the dangers in petroleum-based pharmaceuticals, or you see something's going on in the music industry, especially as of late. But this is what the scriptures are saying is this is ancient. This idea of casting these enchantments through melodies is nothing new. This has been happening since the fallen, the cutting of roots, these chakras, the mixing of herbs, all these things. The Enoch is painting this picture of where all of these came from, and it's being unambiguous that these things came from the fallen. So it's just important to know. So maybe you have someone who's had these psychedelic trips on DMT, or who um, are just very in tune with their horoscope and astronomy, which is going to go on to talk about, or astrology rather. It's going to go on to talk about some of those things. And it just, they say it just works for them, you know, or these quote unquote white magic. The book of Enoch is being unambiguous that all of this stuff comes from the fallen. And you shouldn't be surprised that it quote unquote works, or that something happens when you participate in these things. But it's almost but it's being very clear that it's wickedness. And Genesis 6 says that it actually perpetuates sin and actually speeds up the judgment and wrath of God. This is not lending to flourishing. It's doing the exact opposite. So this is what's happening. What's happening is the fallen angels, they fall, they take women, and they begin to teach them. And what they teach them is this, what we would call magic. And it's not just magic like casting of spells, even though that is some of it, but some of it's songs, some of it is pharmaceuticals, some of it is these psychedelic trips, some of it is frequency and vibration stuff. All of this stuff that in and of itself the Most High has made, and there are ways to use these things, but the form that has been given out to the world has come from the fallen and actually leads to more wickedness. Now, so this is what happened. This is the plot line of what's going on in Genesis chapter 6. And the reason why it's important is because we've got three falls in the book of Genesis. We got the Genesis 3 fall. Let's go back to it real quick. We've got the three rebellions. The women saw that the tree was good for food, and she took. So that fall of Adam and his wife in the garden because of the serpent. Then we've got the Genesis 6. The sons of God saw that the daughters of man were good or were attractive, and they took. So Genesis 3, Genesis 6 are being put parallel with one another. And then the Genesis 11 fall. Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower. Let us make a Shem, a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed. And we'll get there eventually. So we're spending this time on Genesis 6 and on the book of Enoch because this is a large plot line for the rest of the Bible as to why things are as messed up as they are. and why we need a savior, and why the Most High is going to call this man Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and his sons to be a part of the lineage that changes and transforms this whole situation. So this is of colossal importance. Okay, so now let's look at who are the main characters here. We started talking about it a little bit. The leader, his name is Simyaja. He was the ruler over them. Then we got these other guys. One of them's name is Kokabel. We saw that in this other version. This is kind of a bad transliteration. And Coco Bell means star, which is really interesting because how many things do you hear about you can be a star, or American Idol, or getting a Hollywood star? All of these things. Hollywood, by the way, is the kind of wood a witch would use to create her wand, wood from a holly tree. So all of this has these like witchcraft roots to it. And what does Hollywood promise? That you're going to be, we'll make you to this big star. All you got to do is take certain oaths and do certain things. You have to go through certain rites to be part of the group, right? All of it sounds really weird, really bizarre, really conspiratorial. Till you open up the book of Enoch and you go, oh, it's actually just right here. This is what it says. Okay, chapter 7, verse 2. But those who became pregnant brought forth great giants from 3,000 cubits. These giants ate up the produce of men when the men were not able to produce for them. The giants had courage against them and ate up the men. And they began to sin against the birds and the wild beasts and the reptiles and fish, each of them, and ate up the flesh and drank the blood. Then the earth brought up charges against the lawless ones. So now we've got these giants. They're talking about the Nephilim. So now in Genesis 6, we tell us that we have these things called Nephilim. These are the mighty men of old, the men of renown. And Enoch says it really plainly. These are these great giants, and they grow to these huge sizes. And whether that's exaggerated or literal, they're these humongous people, and that they're are half people, half Elohim, right? And these huge giants, they eat up all the produce of the land. They take courage against people because they're so much bigger, stronger than them, and they actually end up beginning to eat all kinds of things and drinking the blood, which is a big no-no in the note in the in the scriptures as a whole. And it calls them the lawless ones. These are the lawless ones. That's really interesting. The lawless ones. What is the opposite of following after the Most High? It's being lawless, right? So these are the great giants. All right, now let's look at the actual characters. Chapter 8 begins to turn. We begin to turn a little bit of a corner because we got to see it actually expounds even more. It says Azazel taught the humans to make swords and weapons. Now hold that in your mind. What is the fallen angel technology that's being passed to man that is aggregating the destruction of humanity by way of making sin become accelerated? Well, it's sorcery, enchantments, cutting of roots, herbs. Now we know it's the making of swords and weapons, shields and breastplates. So we're talking about war technology, the advancement of war technology from this angel called Azazel. The lessons of the angels, and they showed them to their mining and craftsmanship, anklets and adornment, powders and painted eyes. We're talking about makeup and BBLs, and all kinds of chosen stones in dyeing, much ungodliness. So here's what's the result of what these angels have done. Much ungodliness and prostitution happened, and they were led astray and ruined in all their ways. Shemyaja taught enchantments and cutting of roots. This one taught spells of healing. This one taught astrology. This one taught the science of symptoms. This one taught watching the stars. This one taught the course of the moon. Therefore, the cry of the utterly destroyed people went up to heaven. Okay, I want to come down just a little bit more. Again, it's spelling out who these ones are, but I want us to keep our eyes on Azazel and Shemyaja as the leaders. We're going to come back to them. Verse 4, and they said to the Lord, "You, O Lord of Lords, and you are the Lord of Lords and God of gods, King of the ages. The throne of your glory lasts unto all the generations of the ages, and your name is holy and great and blessed unto all the ages. For you made all things, and having all power and all things before you uncovered and open in sight. And you see, so this is now these angels that have not fallen, they're making a plea to the Most High, like, yo, what's going on? And they say, you see all the things that Azazel has made, who taught all the wrongdoings upon the earth. So now Azazel is being credited with what? All the wrongdoings on the earth, and made visible the mystery of the ages that are in the heavens, which men pursue and know. Semyaja, to whom you gave power to rule those who are together with him. Now, this is just going to be kind of a, yeah, I'll just do that now. Okay, let me just read a little bit more, and then we'll come back. And they went to the daughters of the people of the earth and slept with them, so that they were defiled. Let's go down. And verse 4, and he said to Raphael, bind Azazel, bind Azazel, hand and foot, and throw him into the darkness. Now, this is what First Peter actually quotes. This is the verse that First Peter actually quotes when he talks about being bound in the darkness and preaching to the spirits that are in chains. Bind Azazel hand and foot and throw him into the darkness. Open the desert that is in the Dadul, and throw him there. And place under him the rugged and sharp stones, and let darkness cover him. Let him live there forever. Cover up his appearance, and let no light be seen. For in the days of great judgment, he will be led away into the burning. So this guy Azazel, he's getting a special kind of treatment here. He's getting bound hand and foot, thrown into these dark places, bound and sealed there, and for the day of great judgment he will be led into the burning. The earth that the angels removed was healed, but reveal the healing of the earth so that they may heal the blow, such and such. Verse 8, and the whole earth was destroyed and laid waste. Why? Because of the works of Azazel's teaching, ascribed to him all sin. So who is all sin ascribed to according to Enoch? It's ascribed to Azazel. But I thought it said that it's Samaja that was the leader of this group of beings. Here, what's happening in verse 6 and verse 7 is this is two names for the same being. Azazel and Shemyaza are the same being. And here's why I say that. Let's go back. Chapter 6, Shemaja was their ruler. Chapter 6, verse 3. Chapter 6, verse 7, Shemaja was the ruler of the angels. Then it names all of the second tier, the ones that report directly to him. And it says that these are the chiefs of the 10 among them. So now you've got Shemaja, you've got these 18, and then you've got underlings under them. So we're talking about a tiered system. And it might look like, if I put it with my hands, it would look like a triangle. What does that remind you of, right? No mention of Azazel. Azazel is first mentioned here, and then he's mentioned here, or Shemaja is mentioned here. These two different things that the same being taught them. And the reason we know this is the same being is because Shemaja is the leader. Azazel is then conflated with this same being. He's bound hand and foot. The angels complain to the Most High, not about Shemaja, but about Azazel. Azazel is the one that's teaching all these things, etc., etc. Right? Then Michael said, "Go and make known to Azazel and to those remaining with him, those women with whom they mixed, being defiled by them in their cleanliness. Sorry, should their sons ever be slaughtered? Should their sons ever be slaughtered and see the destruction of their beloved, bind them for 70 generations, the wooded vows of the earth, until the days of their judgment and consummation, until the judgment of the ages is completed. Then they will be led away into the gaping abyss of fire, and into the torture, and into the jail, being shut up forever." And we'll stop there just for a second. So let's go back. Let's actually look at what we got here in Enoch. What we got here is a tiered system. In Genesis 3, we don't get the name of a being. We get what it is, right? We get its ontological aspect, right? Nahash. And Nahash is, if you remember, he's a serpent. The serpent was more crafty than all the other beasts of the field, right? So Nahash is a serpent, but we also said he's a conjurer. That's what that word Nahash means. He's and that corroborates with what we see in this rebellion, that they're teaching enchantments, they're teaching sorcery, all these things. So it shouldn't be surprising to us that Nahash is not only a serpent, but he's also a conjurer. But Nahash is also a bronzen one. He's a shining one. And we'll see this kind of light bearer aspect of this in just a moment. Um, in the Bible, when you see the word Satan, it's actually in Hebrew, it's the word Hasatan, and that gets carried over into the New Testament as well that we have in Greek. Every single time the word Satan is used and it's talking about the chief rebel, it doesn't say. It always uses the definite article, meaning there's always a the in front of it. It's the Satan. It's the devil, which means what? It's talking about a title and a role that he's playing, right? He is the accuser. He is the accuser. And he's the chief accuser. He's the chief rebel. So the serpent is the devil and the Satan. Um, and now here in Enoch, we're seeing that there's a name or a couple of names ascribed to him. In Enoch, we see him called Azazel and also Shemyaza, which in the book of Jasher and Jubilees, he gets a different name and it's Mastema. And it's because, and we've talked about this already before, but it's because the Bible uses these names to describe it. They're these important descriptors of who these beings are. The Bible is doing really important things with names. So, for instance, the word Azazel, right? Az means goat, and Azel it basically means to get out or to push out or to go out, right? So he is Azazel. This being Azazel is a goat that was cast out or pushed out, right? And we see that of him. And spoiler alert, we're gonna get to a being called Baphomet. And what does Baphomet look like? It's a goat head, and it's got yeah, it's got male parts and female parts, and he is seen as the chief rebel. Are we surprised that the chief rebel is a goat when the chief rebel in Enoch is Azazel? In fact, in the book of Genesis, I'm sorry, in the book of Leviticus, on the Day of Atonement, this extremely colossal moment in the life of the Israelites, there are these two goats that get sacrificed. One gets sacrificed to the Most High. The sins, or I'm sorry, one gets slaughtered in the temple, and the blood of the innocent goat cleanses the temple, right? So the whole point is the temple has to be clean in order for the Most High's presence to be there, and that's what the whole Day of Atonement is about. Then there's another goat, and the other goat gets the sins of the Israelites cast on it, and it says this one shall be a. If you're reading the King James, it says this one shall be a scapegoat, right? Well, what's happening there is actually um, and we'll get to these chapters eventually. But what's happening in that particular story is it's saying that this one is for Azazel. There's a very specific Hebrew way that it says this, but it's for Azazel or towards Azazel, right? And it's not that the Israelites are sacrificing to another deity, especially not this evil deity. But what's happening is it's a proof of the demotion of Nahash. Remember, the curse of the serpent is that he was going to eat the dust of the ground, right? He's gonna have to crawl on his belly. So he goes from an exalted one to the lowest of the low, and he's gonna have to eat the dust or the dirt of the ground, right? Well, what's happening in Leviticus chapter 16 is one of these goats is getting all the nasty, gunky junk, the spiritual junk of Israel cast on it. It's going to be filled with sin, filled with the nation's iniquity and sin, and it's going to get sent out to the desert places, presumably to be eaten by Azazel because now that's his diet. He is the one that eats dust. He's become no different than an unclean animal like a pig. Pigs are like the most highest garbage, natural garbage cans. They'll eat anything and they're disgusting animals. This is why we're called not to eat them, right? So Azazel has become like that. He's become like the most unclean animal. So on the Day of Atonement, the people of Israel the high priest, on behalf of the people of Israel, uh, confesses all the sins of Israel on it, and they send it out to the garbage can to Azazel. Okay, so the serpent, Nahash, Hasatan, or the Satan, the devil, Azazel, Shemuza, they're all the same thing. This word right here, Shemuza, right? Why would it give us two different names for this one being? I think this is all hypothesis. So eat the meat, spit out the bones. But I think this is what's going on. Azazel telling us a little bit ontologically of what this thing is. It's this goat being that gets kind of cast out, and it's now become this unclean kind of grotesque goat cast out thing. But then Shemuza, when he at the height of this being's kind of ontological being, he's called Shemuza, which the word Shem in Hebrew means um, it means name or reputation. Remember in Genesis chapter 6, it says that these were the men of renown, and that is the word Shem. These were the men of Shem, right? The Bible's going to keep playing on that word Shem. Well, Shem Uzzah, and that last part of the word in Hebrew, Uzzah, would be strength. So this is the angel of great strength, of great reputation and strength. And we shouldn't be surprised by that because he's the leader of these fallen angels. His name happens to also be Azazel, this goat that's gotten cast out, right? Same being, I think. So we get this tiered system. The serpent, or Azazel, Shemuza, Mastema, is the chief rebel. But then you got the 18, these guys right here that I'm not going to read all their names right now. And then you've got the rest of the fallen angels who are, so remember, these guys, these are the chiefs of the tens among them. So now these guys have these angels under them, and then you have human agents under them. And why do I say that? Let's look back at Ephesians chapter 6. Put on the whole armor of Yah, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. So the devil has schemes. You've got to put on the armor of God in order to stand against the schemes of the devil. Why? We do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of the of evil in the heavenly places. We're talking about a tiered system. We're talking about this right here. So as Paul is alluding in Ephesians chapter 6 in his mind as to what we're wrestling against, hey, you got to put on the whole armor of God, right? So that we can stand against the schemes of the devil. The devil has schemes. We got to stand against them. Why? Because we're not wrestling against flesh and blood, but we're wrestling against all of this stuff right here. Human agents that report to these fallen, that report to the 18, that ultimately report to the one. This is what we're wrestling against. Again, this is why the book of Enoch is important. It gives us these details. Okay, so what happens next? I think we're going to power through. Let's just power through. Before these words were spoken, Enoch was taken, and nobody knew where he was taken to, or where he is now, and what happened to him. His works were with the watchmen in the days, in his days were with the holy ones. And standing there, I, Enoch, was blessing the Lord of greatness, the King of the ages, and behold, the watchman of the holy great one uh, uh, called me. Enoch, scribe of righteousness, go and speak to the watchmen of heaven, and any who left behind the high heaven, the holy eternal place, who were defiled with the women, just as the sons of the earth did. They did the same also, and they took for themselves women. You have brought great destruction on the earth, and there will be no peace for you, no remission of sin, and though they rejoice in their children, and though they rejoice in their children, they will see the murder of their beloved ones, and they will groan over the destruction of their children. They will be bound forever, and there will be for them no mercy and peace. So now you've got a sect of watchers, namely Michael and Raphael and Uriel, who call, Enoch gets called up. They have this conversation with him, and they say, hey, I just want to let you know this is what's going down. You're gonna go down to the watchers that fell, that came down from their high estate, as what Jude says. Jude chapter. There's only one chapter. Jude verse 6, when it talks about the angels that did not stay in their heavenly place but came down from their high estate and did their foolishness. This is again what Jude is alluding to right here. So the watchers that didn't fall are talking to Enoch and they're saying, "Hey, take this message to these fallen watchers." So verse 13, Enoch said to Azazel, "Go, there will be no peace for you. Great judgment has come out against you to bind you. There will be neither pause nor questioning for you about what wrongs you brought to light, and about all works of ungodliness and wrongdoing and failure. That again is sin. All that you declare to the people." Then I went and spoke to all of them. They all were terrified, trembling, and fear gripped them. They request that I should write to them records of questioning, so that there might be remission of sins for them, and that I might read to them the records of questioning before the Lord of heaven. For they are not yet able to speak nor lift their eyes to the heaven from the shame of their sin, so they were condemned. Then I wrote the record of their questioning and their prayer concerning their spirits and what they are asking, how they should for them a remission of sins and length of days. Then I went and sat upon the waters of Dan in the land of Dan, which is from the right side of Hermon toward the west. The reason I highlighted that is because the tribe of Dan in the end of Genesis is called a serpent, which is really interesting to me. And in the book of uh, Revelation, as the Most High gathers the 12 tribes and there's 12 gates, all of the tribes are there except for the tribe of Dan. And I don't exactly know what to do with that, but this is just really interesting to me that in Genesis 50, when the blessings are being spoke over the tribes of Israel, the tribe of Dan gets called a snake. In the book of Enoch, it says that this whole foolishness thing, this whole thing that's happening, it's happening real close to the tribe of Dan. And then in the book of Revelation, it says that God gathers the 12 tribes, and there's 12 tribes, but it's Joseph and Ephraim that's listed in that list, and Dan's not listed. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. It's just something interesting. Let's keep going forward. Before them, I reported them all the visions that I saw in my sleep, and I was beginning to speak words of righteousness, reproving the watchers. Let me see here. So this is the Most High. So the Most High says, basically the watchers that didn't fall, they tell Enoch, "Hey, go take a message to the fallen ones. Yeah, there's nothing for you. There's no remission of sin for you." Then the fallen ones, they're trying to barter some type of agreement, and they're like, "Hey, what do we got to do?" So Enoch, write down something for us and take it to the Most High. So they've lost access, right? And that's gonna play a key part. These angels have lost access like they once had. So now it's Enoch that has access and not them. Very interesting. And Enoch says, "Okay." He writes down whatever their thing is, and this is now the answer. And he answered and said to me, "The true man, a man of the truth, the scribe." Then I heard his voice say, "Be not afraid, Enoch, a true man and a scribe of the truth. Come here and hear my voice. Go and say to those who sent you, it is necessary for you to ask about the people and not the people about you." There's a Here's what's being said right there. Aren't you supposed to be praying for the people and you got the people praying for you? What's going on here? This fall has colossally reversed the roles. That's important. Remember what Nahash's whole point was. The serpent, what he's trying to do is he's trying to usurp God's created order. Now Enoch goes and brings. He's now being sent to answer these fallen angels, and what the Most High says through him is, "How is it that you got this guy praying for you when you're supposed to be the one caring for him?" Verse 3. Why did you leave behind the high and holy eternal heaven? Why did you go sleep with the women and defile the daughters of humans, taking for yourselves women like the sons of the earth, making and begetting giant children, et cetera, et cetera? And essentially, what happens is the Most High emphatically says, basically, it's up. Now, let's go back here because this is where this is something. We'll come back to that in just a minute. So let me go all the way back just for a second. Why Enoch? Remember, this book is in the Ethiopia, the oldest Bible that there is. It's in there, and it's in there as the Word of God. It's also in the Catholic Bible. Whatever you think about them, it's in the Catholic Bible as a part of the inspired Word. Um, and not just that, but all scholars agree at least it was written during the Second Temple literature. I happen to think it's actually more ancient than that. Um, and so these would have been the thing. We know for sure that these are the things that are living in the mind of the New Testament. Paul alludes to it in Ephesians chapter 6. Peter quotes it directly in First Peter. Jude quotes it directly in verse 6 of the book of Jude. This is why we're reading this. So what happened? Sons of God, daughters of men, they had sex. Not only did they have sex and have giants, but also these sons of God were teaching them all this craft, all the craftiness, all of this, what we would call magic or witchcraft or sorcery or new age or whatever you want to call it. They're giving them all this ancient forbidden knowledge, just like the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They're propagating knowledge and they're bartering knowledge for these people. And not only that, but then these giants are eating flesh, drinking blood, and domineering people, so that the whole earth is crying out, much like when the earth cries out when it drinks the blood of Cain. So, who are the key players? We saw that whole tiered system, and specifically, there's Azazel and Shemyaja. Most people believe those are two different beings. I think from the wording, it seems like it's the same being that's being given two different names because of the role that he plays and because of how the text is trying to describe who this is. And namely, that is the devil, or what we call the devil or Satan, which is not a name. The devil and Satan are roles. They're always used with the definite article. So what's the name of that being? Well, Jubilees and Jasher calls him Mastema. Enoch calls him Shemaja or Azazel. What were the consequences? The consequences of these beings are Shemaja leading this rebellion and these rebels falling is there is no grace for them. There is no forgiveness for them. And they are doomed not only to die like men, according to uh, um, Psalm 82, but they also, according to Enoch, they have to watch their bastard children die. And now, when we get to the New Testament, it starts talking about in English unclean spirits. It's almost exclusively using the Greek term bastard kids, right? Or bastard spirits, not bastard kids, sorry. Bastard spirits. And the reason it's using this term bastard spirits is because these are these are the offspring of the giants. And in fact, when we get to the book of Joshua, you get the Rephaim when the Most High is telling the children of Israel to go in and to clear out the land. He's not telling them to kill people indiscriminately. Every time the Most High tells the children of Israel to go into a town and kill everybody, anything breathing, it's because it's where the Raphaim is. In other words, these are the remnants of the sons of God and the daughters of men. That unholy union that was never supposed to exist. These unclean spirits, these flesh beings that are unauthorized. And the Most High says, clear them out of the land. It's them that are being killed indiscriminately in the book of Joshua. So this is making sense of our Bible. Okay. Now, what are the implications? This is a little bit controversial. And I'm going to try to do this in about 2 minutes, and then we'll be done. There's a whole lot more that we can go through in the book of Enoch, but I wanted to give a brief overview. How do we see this play out in our world? If this is true, why does it matter, and how potentially do we see this play out in our world? Well, when we're talking about epistemology, right? That is the how do we know that something's true? How can we come to a firm foundation on what is true? You have to build your epistemology on what's called the evidentiary method, which just means you got to stack up your evidence, bring your receipts, right? And in a court of law, how do you prove something beyond a reasonable doubt? Your receipts stack up much higher than the defense attorney's receipts, right? So I just want to bring a few receipts, and maybe it's coincidence. And if you come to the conclusion that what I'm saying here is just mere coincidence, then that's if that's if that's the conclusion you come to, that's fine. But at some point, you have to ask yourself, when are these things no longer just mere coincidence? So let's just look at some things. This is the intro to Paramount Pictures. This is just a still shot. But if you remember, anytime a movie from Paramount comes on, remember Paramount means the top of the mountain. What happens? You see these stars, they come from the heavens, they do this little thing upon the water, and then they come up and they make this little thing. And it's these stars that descend upon the mountain. It's exactly what Enoch says. And then we get into the movie from Hollywood, right? And maybe I'm overreacting like that. Come on, stars, like, who knows? But then you got Walt Disney, the Walt Disney Corporation, and at the intro of every one of their movie, there's a star that falls or something that looks like a star that falls, and it swoops down and it creates a dome just like this. And then there's this tower that's built up that pierces the dome, which when we get to Genesis chapter 11, we'll talk about the Tower of Babel and what the Apocrypha says that the Tower of Babel is all about. Again, this is the story that would have been living in the minds of at least the New Testament writers, if not even more ancient than that. And so, a part of just a brief spoiler, a part of what was happening in the Tower of Babel is that they were trying to pierce the expanse, the rakia, the dome, the canopy above the earth. They were trying to pierce that canopy so that they could make war in heaven. This is what the Apocrypha tells us very clearly, right? And it just so happens that Walt Disney has this little star that falls, that comes, makes this dome, and they've got this tower that pierces every time this tower pierces the heaven, as if they were trying to make the Tower of Babel. Again, circumstantial evidence, maybe it's just a coincidence. In the 1940 film Pinocchio, it's where this guardian angel she makes Pinocchio a real boy, and it's that whole story. Again, this is 1940, and when you look at this scene when she's making specifically when Pinocchio, go back and watch. I was just watching this with my kids the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's in everything. This whole fallen angel thing is in everything. But anyway, when Pinocchio gets himself into some trouble and he calls out I almost said fallen angel, which is this is what she is. Spoiler alert. But when Pinocchio calls out for the guardian angel to help him, um, she comes down, but she's a star that's in the heavens. She comes down across some water and goes into the door and manifests as this pretty woman, and she says, "You got to be a good boy," and she lets him out of his cage, and that whole thing. But in 1940, this is the the way this angel is conceived is in the mind of what the animators, the writers, whoever made the decision is it's an angel that comes down out of a star. Remember, we said one of the angels' name was Kokabel, a star of God. The star comes down, goes into this guy's room, manifests as a person, and is able to set him free. Columbia Pictures. Now you've got this woman named Columbia, and she's a light bearer. She's holding up this light, this shining thing, right? That's really interesting. Again, just circumstantial evidence. This is from the Smithsonian website. The Smithsonian website. It's called the name of this article is before Lady Liberty, there was Lady Columbia. This is just a snippet from this article from the Smithsonian website. Throughout the Revolution, talking about the Revolutionary War, Columbia was a source of strength, a rallying cry. By the end of the war, the victorious colonists celebrated their triumph by invoking her. Hail Columbia, happy land. Hail ye heroes, heaven born band. Let's just read that one more time. By the end of the war, the Revolutionary War, the victorious colonists celebrated their triumph by invoking this thing called, this picture is from the Library of Congress. Notice she has a shield in her hand. We'll come back to that in just a second. The victorious colonists celebrated their triumph by invoking her, Hail Columbia. Who do you say hail to? It's like hail to the king, right? Hail Columbia, happy land. Hail ye heroes, heaven born band, who fought and bled in freedom's cause. The lawyer wrote the lawyer and poet Joseph Hopkins wrote in 1789. Joseph Hopkins' verses were soon set to music, and Hail Columbia became the country's first unofficial national anthem sung throughout the 19th century. So, our first unofficial national anthem was to Columbia, Hail Columbia, talking about how she's heaven born and how she's given these people the victory, etc. Okay, again, circumstantial evidence. Maybe that's not real. This is the layout of Washington, D.C. What is Washington, D.C.? It's Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. In the Testament of Solomon, it talks about this particular geometric shape called a pentanagram or a pentagram, and specifically an upside down pentagram. In the Testament of Solomon, it talks about how he was able to catch and trap these, again, this apocryphal book. So eat the meat, spit out the bones, whatever you want to do with it, right? But in the apocryphal book, the Testament of Solomon, it's talking about how Solomon was able to capture these deities with this particular shape. And this is the actual layout of the District of Columbia. In the Old Testament, what we call demons the word is actually shadim. And shadim basically means these territorial entities, these entities that are over territories. And in fact, the word I in Hebrew is a loan word from Canaanite, which basically is the word for, I'm sorry. Is it the word I or is it the word city? It's the word I in Hebrew is a loan word from Canaanite, which was basically a word that meant the deities that ruled over particular cities, right? So in the ancient world, there were deities that ruled over cities. And in our very modern world, we have a place that's called the District of Columbia, and it happens to be laid out like an inverted pentagram, which is used in witchcraft all over the place. And the tip of the inverted pentagram is the White House. That's interesting. But then, and we're not going to even talk about, there's way, way more than that with Washington, D.C. But just let's look at a couple of things. You just happen to have this thing. Why is it laid out that way? That's weird. I've been on a tour there, and they said the reason we laid it out like this is so that if something bad happens at the White House, people can't escape. It's very hard to navigate. You can't just speed away. That's what they told us, right? So you've got the White House at the tip of the pentagram. Then there's just two other things that I want to look at, and there's way more here. But the Washington Monument and the U.S. Capitol. First, the Washington Monument. The Washington Monument is an obelisk. This is from the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry and its Kindred Scientists by Albert Mackey, right? The obelisk is a quadrangular monolithic column diminishing upward with its sides gently inclined, but not so as to terminate in a pointed apex, but to form at the top of at a caddish pyramidal figure by which the whole is finished off and brought to a point. So he said, he just basically described this perfectly. A pyramid at the top and this whole quadrangular situation. This is an obelisk. The Washington Monument is an obelisk. It was the most common species of monument in ancient Egypt. What in the heck is an ancient Egyptian relic doing in the District of Columbia, the Washington Monument? This is weird. Where there are still where they are still to be found in great numbers, the sides being covered with hieroglyphic inscriptions, obelisks where it is supposed originally erected, obelisks were it is supposed originally erected in honor of the sun god. Uh oh. Pliny says the kings of Egypt in times past made the stones certain long beams, which they are called obelisks, and consecrated them unto the sun, whom they honored as God. What did we say Nahash was? He was a conjurer, he was a serpent, but he was also a shining one, right? In uh, let's go back for a second. So in the district, first of all, we got Columbia Pictures, and she's holding up the light. She's a light bearer. Interesting. In the District of Columbia, we've got this star formed, and the White House is at the tip of it. Then in the middle of the city, we got this obelisk. We know 100% this is an Egyptian obelisk for Washington, right? And then you've got this. This is called the apotheosis of George Washington. The apotheosis of George Washington is found right here. It's the dome of the Capitol building, the very centerpiece of the United States Capitol building. Is this painting? When you look up, you see this. It's called the apotheosis of George Washington. Remember, America is a Greco-Roman society. So what should we? So it's here's what's interesting. You've got all around him these deities. George Washington. Apotheosis in Latin means the deification, right? So it's the deification of George Washington in modern vernacular. How George Washington became a god. How George Washington became a god. That's the name of this painting. It's the painting that's at the dome, the top of the dome of the United States Capitol. And what do you see here? You see, you see this one deity with a sword and shield, and she's lording over these people. You also see the eagle, which is actually the phoenix, which is an Egyptian bird. This is one that really gives it away. You've got this trident right here. So this is in Roman mythology, this is Neptune. In Greek mythology, this is Poseidon. So what is Poseidon and Neptune doing near George Washington and with this? This looks a lot like Columbia to me. Which, if this is Columbia, then in the Roman mythology, this would be Athena. And you got a god here and a deity here. So what's happening? Why in the world at the Washington State or the District of Columbia, the Capitol building, do you have this as the prominent picture? And this is a zoomed in version of what you see right here. George Washington seated. So this thing is called the apotheosis of George Washington. So it's about how he became a god. And what do you have? All of these gods around him. This is the B'nai Elohim. This is the most controversial statue of George Washington. And I can't remember the exact year, but shortly after he was president, they erected this statue of him. And it was a super controversial statue. And they say the statue was controversial because because it was so lewd in his day. It showed the president of the United States with his shirt off, so they had to take it, and it's in the Smithsonian somewhere to this day. But he's doing the as above, so below thing, and when you see him here, he's doing the so below with the sword in his hand. Now, when you see him here in this statue, he's doing the as above with the sword in his hand down here. This is Baphomet. Remember what we said about Baphomet? You see the inverted pentagram or pentanagram, according to the Testament of Solomon. This is Baphomet. He's doing the as above, so below. He's got the thing protruding from his pants. And the drawings of they didn't do it in the statue, but the drawings of Baphomet have him with breasts. So he's both. And then he's got angel wings. But my point is, you got both of those things represented here. I think this is okay, a couple more. You've got the Statue of Liberty. And the Statue of Liberty has these sun rays coming out of his head or her head. There's these same statues very similar statues of a god named Helios. Helios is the sun god. The Statue of Liberty, of course, is bearing the torch. But Helios is the sun god. So the cosmological, the scientific cosmological model, the modern scientific cosmological model, which was propagated in the mid 1500s, that the world revolves around the sun. Um, that's called the heliocentric model, right? Rather than the geocentric model. And the heliocentric, anyway. So this is actually Helios, and what's going, or the sun god, and what's going, why this is an actual picture zoomed in of the bottom of the statue. You see whatever Lady Liberty is. Why does she got chains around her ankles and chains that have been broken? What does Enoch say about Azazel, that he's going to be chained until the end? What does the book of Revelation say about what happens in the end? That he's able to, he's set free for a time to roam the earth until Yahusha comes and casts him into the fiery pit, which is exactly what Enoch says about what's going to happen to Azazel. He's going to be cast. He's held in chains in deep darkness for now, and then he's going to be in the time of judgment. He's going to be brought up and cast into the pit. All of these things go together. Why in the world is America making a? This is one, two, three, four, five, six, seven sun rays coming off. How do we know that they're sun rays? In the book of Judges, there's a man named Samson, and it says that Samson has 7 dreadlocks. Or it doesn't say dreadlocks, it says locks. Samson has 7 locks. And Samson's name is, in Hebrew, is Shemesh Un. Shemesh Un. The word Shemesh means sun. So the whole story of Samson, we're supposed to see him we're supposed to see him like a sun. He's fiery in his passion. He sets all these foxes on fire and he sends them into a village and it burns this whole village up. He gets bound hand and foot and his anger burns and he rips the cords apart such that they burn off of him, right? The whole story of Samson, we're supposed to see him as a son, and his hair is what gives it away, that he has 7 locks in his head, is what the scriptures say. And here we go again. Yeah. So here we go. So why is it that they have the sun rays right here? This is Helios. And then the US dollar. You've probably seen this since you were in elementary school. Why is all this weird stuff on the dollar? And we're not going to get into the details of that, but there's all this weird stuff going on with the dollar. I think that's the last one. Okay. All right. So we've been going for quite a while, and I'm sorry. Feel free to take this in parts and go back and reread and read the book of Enoch yourself and look up this weird stuff yourself and see if I've made any of this stuff up. But the bottom line is, and the point is, that this stuff seems very strange and occult or hidden, but it's actually when these things come to light in the book of Revelation, it's playing on a Greek word, apocalypsis. And apocalypsis doesn't mean the end of the world. Apocalypsis means revealing. So, and what's happening in the book of Revelation is that all the facade is being stripped off, and the Most High is showing John what it really is. He's showing it the true nature of the matter. Sure, it's probably metaphor and a whole bunch of simile and things behind it, but what's happening is all the facade in the book of Revelation, all the facade is being stripped away, and what's happening is there's a great revealing of what really is. Now, we've been told that America is a Christian nation and one nation under God, et cetera, et cetera. And then the money says, "In God we trust." But I propagate that the money is the God that is being trusted in America. And if it's really if it's really the Most High that America was ever interested, there's this narrative that what's happening is that America is falling away from God, and that's why this great downfall is happening. But I hope you see that from its very foundations, Statue of Liberty, the obelisk of George Washington, the apotheosis of George Washington, et cetera, and et cetera, and et cetera. This has been a nation that was founded on the fallen. It was never founded on the Most High. There's a book called The Secret Teachings of All Things by Manly P. Hall. He's he just writes about Freemasonry and yeah, whatever his motivations are. But in the very first part of that book, he basically says that all pagan nations always have two religions. There's the religion that they give to the sheep, the people that aren't initiated, that don't know anything. And then there's the religion of the people behind the scenes, the real religion of the philosophers and the politicians. And I say to you that America's always been Christian in name only and evil in practice. This is why the nation captured the children of the Most High, whom we call black people or Negroes, and had them enslaved. They made covenants with the fallen. Okay, let's end with a bit of an encouraging note, right? In Enoch chapter 13, it ends with this. We covered it just really briefly, but this is why we should be encouraged here. Verse 3. Then I went and spoke to all of them, and they all were terrified, trembling and fear gripped them. Um, this is corroborated in the book of James. He says, "You believe there is one God, you do well. Even the angels believe and tremble." Where do you think he got that from? Even the angels believe and tremble. Why are the angels trembling? Because they knew from the very beginning what they were doing was going to get him in a whole bunch of trouble. They thought that what they could do is write up some cheap contract of grace, and that maybe the Most High would let them back in, or that it wouldn't be. They thought they were going to be able to find a way out of it, but Enoch told the fallen angels very clearly, absolutely not. There is no remission for your sin. You're going to have to see these bastard offspring die, and you see that all through the book of Joshua. And this corroborates Genesis 3 that the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent are going to have beef perpetually in the book of Joshua as the children of Israel are going to conquer the land. They're killing the seed of the serpent. They're killing the Rephaim and the Anakim, the fallen ones. Um, and we should be encouraged because they're terrified for a reason. If you put your faith in Christ, in Yahusha, if his blood covers you, if you are following him, if you truly trust him, not only do you have grace, but you have a way of escape. So there's a whole lot of we should be encouraged because if you've never heard this before, when I first caught wind that these things were real and this was true, it made the spiritual world much more dangerous and scary to me. Because it means that these things are still alive. And First John says that the whole world is in the hands of the devil. Paul says in First Corinthians, we are not ignorant of his schemes or his devices, right? So he's constantly working and he's working through these agents. But we should be encouraged because they're terrified. And the current state of the world with all of the crap happening, the bombs going off and and this and that, to me, that smells of desperation. And if our enemy is desperate, it means it's because he's losing. So be encouraged. So I'll end it there. I'm sure I've gone way, way, way over the time that I wanted to go, but I wanted to squeeze it all in so I didn't have to do this again. We'll be moving forward the next time we're together with Genesis chapter 7. We're going to look at the flood narrative, and we're going to go from there. So, yeah, this is Melanated Truth. My name is John. Like, comment, subscribe. Uh, Feel free to disagree or to challenge anything that I said. Just do it respectfully. And I'll leave like we always do. Romans 15:13. Yeah, 15:13. May the God of hope fill you with joy and peace in believing, so that you may abound in hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Hallelujah. Amen.